In this video, I'm going to explain why having it all is not enough, as well as what to do so the inside, right, what you're feeling on the inside internally starts to match the outside. So if you've got a great life, you've got money, you've got a great relationship, great friends, good community, you've got all these different things that you think should make you happy, and yet you don't feel happy, fulfilled, satisfied, this video is for you. Now, this was me, right? I'm not saying I was a billionaire or anything like that, but, I didn't have a Lamborghini. I didn't have a huge house or anything like that, but I did have a lot of the things that I thought I needed to be happy. All right. So I had my own business. I worked online. I was living in Thailand for a lot of the time. I also lived in South America. I had a digital nomad online business where I could basically live anywhere. I could set my own schedule. I'm my own boss. I had more than enough money to do most of the things that I wanted to do. So I had my own business, money to go with it, a great girlfriend at the time. She was really hot, right? So I know a lot of guys think, if I just had the hot girlfriend, then I'd be happy, right? So I had a hot girlfriend, great friends, complete control over my own schedule. Like I said, I could set my own hours. I could live in Sydney. I was in Medellín, Colombia for a while, in Chiang Mai, Thailand, lived all over the place, went to conferences, did podcast interviews, all kinds of stuff. I had a great life, status even among a certain community. And I even spent a week on Richard Branson, the billionaire, the guy who runs Virgin or owns Virgin, however it is. I went to an event on his island, spent a week on his private island doing all kinds of fun stuff. It was like one big party. That's a story for another time. But basically had all these things that I thought I should be happy. I should be fulfilled. I should feel like I'm happy. But it wasn't enough. And I couldn't tell you exactly what the problem was. That was part of the problem, is I knew something was wrong. I knew that I wasn't happy. I knew that something was missing, but I didn't have the words or the language or the framework to figure out what the hell was going on. I remember talking to friends and they'd be like, look, everything, you have a great life. What's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like something's missing. I'm just not. It's not that I'm super dupressed or anything either. I'm just everything's just kind of blah. Looking back, it was I describe it it was like living in black and white, right? So everything's there, everything's happening. Life is good in some respects, but it's all just a bit gray. It's black and white. I don't really feel like I'm alive, right? And so like most people in situations like this, I did all kinds of things to try and fix it. All right, I started meditating when I was about 20, I think 18, 19, something, 20 minutes a day for about 10 years. I'd journal. I think I checked one time and it was basically 1 million words or more in my journal. And so I'd done plenty of journaling, plenty of analysis, plenty of trying to figure out my mind. And if I could I thought, stupidly or not, I thought that if I could just analyze myself enough, if I could just analyze, it's obviously because of something that happened when I was this old or that old, or if I could just analyze some stuff enough, use my mind, I could figure it out, and then I would be happy and fulfilled. I'd get to the bottom of it. But that didn't work. Gratitude lists, I had stuff on paper that I'd write down. There was an app I used called the 5-Minute Journal, plenty of gratitude stuff. I remember doing ice baths, Wim Hof, breath work. There was a book called The Presence Process I went through, which was kind of getting closer to the solution, but it still wasn't it. Psychedelics, so LSD, mushrooms, eventually ended up with ayahuasca and things like that as well. And that helped. That was a big part of the journey, but it still wasn't it. I still had done plenty of psychedelics and still felt like something was missing. If anything, that stuff created a bigger split, because I would go and do, say, a psychedelic journey of some kind, and sometimes I would tap into the most beautiful, blissful even states. And I'm like, how can I feel like this now? But then in my day-to-day life, I still just feel like, what's the point? Is this it? Everything's good, but I'm just like, So in some ways, psychedelics made things worse because I got a taste of just how good things could be. I remember doing affirmations in the mirror. I don't know if you've ever done this, but looking at myself in the mirror saying, I love you. Or even just saying it as I go to sleep, listening to affirmation tracks, guided meditations. I read tons of different self-help books about all kinds of stuff, thinking that eventually I would figure it out. Goal setting. So just all the things that people do, all the different things people do to try and be happy and healthy and fulfilled. And I'm not saying it didn't help. It did help, right? It did give my life direction and probably more meaning than, say, someone who doesn't have any of that, for sure. But despite all of that, I still felt like something was missing. Like, I don't know if you feel like that, if you've ever felt like that, but it's like something is just not right. And I know it's not right. And that's what's driving this pursuit. You know, I had a friend at the time, still a very close friend, and he said, it's like you're addicted to self-help. You just need to let it go. Stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to, there's nothing to heal. Just get on with your life. That's good advice too sometimes, and I would go through periods where I would do that, but still I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. How could my life be so good compared to most people on planet Earth? How could life be so good, and yet I'm still so blah about everything, And so I could never shake the feeling that something was missing. No matter how many things I tried, no matter how good my business was, no matter how much money was in the bank, how great the sex was, how great the food was, I'd have pleasure, sure, but there was something else missing. Something was wrong, and I knew it. And I would doubt that sometimes, but I kept going. I kept searching. I kept trying things. And eventually I did find it, the answer, which I'll get to in a second. But yeah, I just knew something was wrong. Something was missing. And actually, in my pursuit, in my journey to try and fix it and try all these different things, I actually almost ended up briefly ended up in a cult. I actually talk about this in number one, the Rage Heart podcast, number one, which you can find on all the podcast networks. I'll put a link down below as well. And, that was some life coaches. They had offered to do a magic mushroom ceremony, and it just ended up being like the biggest session of gaslighting, guilt tripping, manipulation, trying to tell me that I'm basically a bad person, which is standard cult practice to break down your existing personality and insert a new one. So anyway, that was sort of the pinnacle or the climax of this journey, was almost getting sucked into this cult. It was, involved with them for a couple of months, and it was a great learning experience. It taught me so much, and it brought a lot of healing, actually. But that was sort of the climax of getting myself into some pretty serious shit, some pretty serious trouble, because something was wrong and I hadn't figured it out yet. And then I found something, and it changed everything. And this was almost 5 years ago now. And I still, to this day, say that was probably one of the most transformative moments where I'm like, I finally get it. I finally know what's wrong. I finally have the language for it, and I know what to do about it. And 5 years later, almost 5 years later, I'm still using that same approach, that same, modality to continue to cultivate a deep sense of meaning and purpose. And I will say right now that I do not feel that same sense of something's missing, something's wrong, something's off. It's just not there anymore. So whatever that problem was, and I'll get to that in a second, it's not a problem anymore. Okay. And within 2 weeks of sort of stumbling onto this new way of working with myself, I remember feeling like I'd made more progress in 2 weeks than I had in the previous 10 years meditating. It was mind-blowing. It was wild. And like I said, it explained the real reason. It really was explaining the real reason why having it all, while having your life all dialed in, all the external bits and pieces dialed in, it really explained why that was not enough and what to do about it, which is important. So, but before I get to that, if you want some help with this, right? If you've got it all on paper, let's say you've got a 7-figure business, you're fit, you're healthy, you've got a girlfriend or a partner, kids, family, you've got this great life, and it's great. Like, people tell you it's great. Objectively, logically, that it is a great life. And yet you're still like, man, is this it? Like, why do I feel so empty? I have this great life on paper, but I still feel empty. I still feel unfulfilled, unhappy. If that's you, let's fix that. Click the link. There is a link in the description. Click that link and apply for one-on-one coaching. Since going down this path myself, and I'd say by and large solving it, now it really is a mission for me now to share this same approach with other people. I'm doing it in these videos and the podcast and on social media. It really is, at least right now at this stage in my life, I feel a deep sense of purpose and mission behind sharing something that worked so beautifully for me. And if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, if I can remember how to talk, if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I can show you how it works, guide you through the process. So your inside, what you're feeling inside, starts to match what's going on the outside. So your great life on paper is also a felt sense of a great life. There's a link in the description. Click that, apply for coaching, and let's get started. So to make sure that I pay off the the promise of this video, which is that here's why having it all is not enough. And the reason, like I said, I found at some point, 5 years ago, I stumbled onto something that changed everything. And that's what I want to give to you right now. I want to tell you a little bit about it. So here's why having it all is not enough. The reason why having it all is not enough is because we've got to think about the problem. What even is the problem? When people are unhappy, they're unfulfilled, they think, okay, maybe it's probably because I don't have enough money. So they go make the money, they go build a business, they go do that thing, and then they're like, okay, I've got the money. Why do I still feel, maybe it's because I don't have a relationship, right? So they go get a great relationship, but they're like, man, something's still missing. All right. And so we go through this process of thinking that what's going to make us happy is something out there, the money, the relationship, the body, the health, the skill, the hobby, something, friends, status. We think that the problem, it's really just a case of misidentifying the problem, I would say, because we just don't have full awareness of what's going on. We quite naturally think that the problem is what's going on the outside. And sometimes, occasionally that is the issue. But if you have all those things, if you have it all on paper and you still feel unhappy, then clearly you haven't actually dealt with the real issue, right? So what is the real issue? What I discovered about 5 years ago, I found this world of nervous system healing. And within that world, the crux of the issue, or the root cause in so many of these problems, is something called nervous system dysregulation. What that means is that the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system that's running a whole bunch of stuff in the body, is dysregulated. It's chaotic, it's disorganized. The reason that happens is because there's been a whole lot of stress throughout life. Often through childhood is when it starts, but it can also happen from a car accident, like acute, they call them shock traumas, but like acute events that generate a lot of stress that doesn't get processed. That stress builds up in the system and creates dysregulation in our nervous system, and then leads to anxiety, depression, insomnia, a sense of being lost, confused, all kinds of different things. It's like it's the most beautiful thing in some ways, because it's like, oh, now I finally understand what the actual issue is. And if you're wondering, I think sometimes people can get a bit, well, that sounds a bit woo-woo. How does feelings and emotions and stress get stuck in your body? But if you think about like overtraining, right? If you go to the gym and train too much, you don't rest enough, you will literally go into a state of overtraining. This is not like up for debate. This is what happens when bodybuilders, fitness people, athletes train too much. I've had it. You train too much, you overtrain. So the idea is stress builds up. It accumulates in the system until the system starts shutting down. That happens. That's very obvious that happens, say, with squats or deadlifts. But that can just happen when stress is stress. So whether it's the stress of a deadlift or the stress of an argument that you have with your partner, or say even the stress if you're 5 years old and you're angry, but you're not allowed to be angry, so you hold all that shit inside you. It's still stress. It's still not being processed. It's still building up in the system, right? So then you end up in dysregulation. Really means that instead of the nervous system being able to flow from high to low, right? So we have relaxed, they call it ventral vagal, but relaxed when we're able to talk, socially engage, get some work done. We might call that fairly relaxed. Then we have, there's a danger, fight or flight. People know about that. So that's when you're ready to run, ready to fight. That's like a high energy state. And then there's freeze. If a threat comes in, you can't get away, you can't fight them off, the system will shut down and go into freeze. And so basically it gets stuck. It'll get stuck in fight or flight, which is like a high activation, anxious, frenetic, go, go, go kind of state. You see that a lot with entrepreneurs, people who just can't stop. Their mind will not turn off. And if that goes on too long, the whole system starts shutting down. And this is the same thing that happens with overtraining, right? So the stress builds up and they're in that high go, go, go state. And then sooner or later, the body will say no. And there are people who write books about this. I think Gabor Mate has one called When the Body Says No, that you can ignore this stuff for as long as you want, but sooner or later, the body is going to be like, I'm going to make something happen. As in the body speaking, I want to make something happen, so you have to stop. You're going to get a chronic illness. You're going to get burnout, adrenal fatigue. You're going to get something that forces you to slow down if you don't choose to slow down before then. So anyway, that was what I discovered about 5 years ago, this whole world of nervous system healing, and that the real root problem is dysregulation. And then if I could fix that, instead of being stuck in this high activation or this deep, shutdown freeze, which is sort of the other extreme. So you get your baseline in the middle, fight or flight up here, and then you kind of get stuck in freeze. This gets a little bit complicated, but you end up getting stuck in somewhere in the nervous system. Instead of flow, being able to go up and down as the need arises, you get stuck somewhere. And that's why you can't sleep. That's why you might be anxious or something like that. That's why your mind won't shut the hell up. So that's the real problem. Now, if you have nervous system dysregulation, and most people do, I find in my experience, if you have that, making more money, it's not really going to make that much of a difference, right? You can maybe, like, if you're super poor and you make a bit of money and now you're not stressed out about your bills, yeah, it'll help in that case because now you're not going to be worried or stressed about your bills. But beyond that, it's not really addressing the deep down issue, right? Same with the relationship, same with food, same with being fit and healthy. All these things help. They support the system. But until you actually address the dysregulation deep down in your nervous system, it just keeps going on. It doesn't heal on its own. It doesn't heal with time. You need to use specific techniques to start to open the system up. So emotions and stress, because that's, we think about what is stress. Okay, well, it's anger, it's fear, it's shame, it's guilt, it's sadness. It's all these things that we hold on to because we don't want to feel them. That's what's keeping our system all locked up, tense, and unable to feel a sense of aliveness, a sense of meaning and purpose and fulfillment. And so that's nervous system dysregulation, and that's why having it all is not enough, because having it all is not really addressing the dysregulation in the nervous system. It might address the symptoms, but it's not addressing the underlying root issue. And until that's dealt with, it just keeps on going. Okay? So the question at this point is going to be, well, how the hell do I change that? How do I stop being dysregulated, John? And so there's a few things. You can go on Instagram right now. You can find a whole bunch of nervous system gurus and experts giving like a vagus nerve trick, like pull on your ear, or do this like breath where you go, like there's all these like techniques, hacks, quick fixes that these people promise that if you do this, you will regulate your nervous system. And in my experience and the experience of my colleagues or teachers, mentors, that's just not true. It's not that simple. I wish it was, but it's not. So I would say there's three parts. In my experience, in my journey, what has worked really well is there's a handful of things that are really important, and it's not about a quick fix or a hack. Step one is to get some education on your nervous system, on your survival physiology, why it reacts to threats and danger in the way that it does. Why does it go into fight, flight, and freeze? Understanding that, why does it happen? Why is it there? What is it doing? That can help us to be a lot less afraid of what we're feeling, because we start to go, oh, okay, like I don't have to be afraid of my fear or afraid of my shame or afraid of my guilt. These are just different ways my system has evolved over millions of years to deal with life. So the education is a huge piece. Step two is, I'd say, learning to feel. Right? People talk about feeling feelings, but what the hell does that even mean? So feeling feelings really just means feeling your sensations, right? So feeling the heat in your chest, right? The heat in the face, that icky butterfly feeling in your stomach. These are all sensations. We can call them feelings, sensations. It's learning to feel that. That's step two. So step one is education. Step two, learning to feel your feelings, feel your sensations, right? The sensations that are really the underlying experience of the emotion, which is often the root of a lot of these thoughts. And step three, and this is really where it gets interesting, is learning to follow your impulse. And this is where meaning and purpose and feeling alive comes back in. When you can start to feel inside your body, what do you want to do? It's not a thought. It's not a thing you journal about. It's what feels right. And that takes time. It starts with things like, do you rest when you feel like resting? Do you eat when you feel like eating? Do you go to the bathroom when you feel it's time to go to the bathroom? Or do you sort of distract and disconnect from these sensations? And if you do that with those big, obvious sensations, you're probably going to do it with more subtle sensations such as, hey, what would feel really meaningful right now? Okay. So to summarize that, the reason why having it all is not enough is because having it all does not address the root cause in most cases of nervous system dysregulation. As for how to deal with nervous system dysregulation, you need to basically regulate your nervous system. And that's not as simple as just getting a quick fix or a hack from Instagram, some guru. It's really it's a process. It takes time, and it starts with education about how your nervous system works, how your survival physiology works. Next is learning how to feel, right? And learning how to pair. A big one has been learning how to maintain an awareness of the external environment. So you're to see if you can see, or hear if you can hear, to maintain some awareness of your environment while also maintaining awareness of your body. All right, sort of like an internal, external at the same time. And this is one reason meditation often ends up with people being quite disconnected, floaty, spacey. I've seen this a lot. And one fix for that was what I just said, balancing external with internal at the same time. So that's just learning to feel. Interoception is the technical term for the internal feeling. And 3 is learning to follow your impulse, which is a skill you can practice. And you put those 3 things together, you do that consistently, you give it some time, and you will probably find why you don't feel as happy as you want to feel right now. And that may require feeling some things that you've been avoiding for a long time, right? But as you get through that, as you learn to feel into and through those things, that's when the joy and the meaning and the fulfillment, and that's when you start feeling alive. You know, I mentioned before about feeling, just like everything's black and white. Now it feels like it's in color. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, just the way I would explain it is that when you avoid feeling your feelings, when you avoid feeling stuff, right, you can't choose and select between good feelings and bad feelings. You either feel it all or you feel none of it. So if you feel none of it, which is a lot of people these days, because they're out, they drink alcohol, they smoke, they do all these different things to not feel, working all the time, lifting weights, even like all these, socially acceptable habits, even like meditation, all these things can be ways to avoid feeling. But if you avoid feeling, you don't just lose the bad feelings, you lose the good feelings too. And that's why, in my opinion, that's why I did not feel alive. And it's why now I do. Because now I know how to feel. I have a practice of it. I do it regularly. It's just it's a way of being. So that is why having it all is not enough. If you'd like some help with this, like I mentioned before, so if you've got it all on paper, you've got the money, the girlfriend, the partner, the boyfriend, whatever. You've got all the things you think you need to be happy and you're still not happy. You're still not fulfilled. You're still not alive. You still feel like something's missing. Let's fix that. Okay, click the link in the description and apply for one-on-one coaching. Right now I'm focused on working with 7-figure entrepreneurs. So if that's you, you'd be a really good fit for this. But click the link in the description, apply for one-on-one coaching. Limited spots as always, because there's only one of me at the moment and it's a one-on-one. But if you're interested, definitely give that a look and let's get started.